Now let us continue with properties of integers under multiplication. So in this we will begin by looking at the closure property, followed by the commutative property and the associative property. Then we will see what do we mean by multiplication by zero, what is a multiplicative identity, and how does a distributive property work in multiplication. Then finally we will be seeing division of integers. Let us look at properties of integers under multiplication. So firstly we will begin by the closure property. So when you multiply any two integers, the result will always be another integer. That's the closure property. For example, when we multiply 3 and 4, we end up getting 12. So 3 and 4 are integers and 12 is an integer. Similarly, if I am multiplying 6 with minus 2, I end up getting minus 12. So both 6 and minus 2 are integers, and the result, the product, is also an integer. So is the case if I multiply 7 and 0, I end up getting 0. 0 is also an integer. So no matter which two integers you pick, the product will still be an integer. Secondly, we have the commutative property. So in this, the order in which two integers are multiplied will not affect the result. So for example, whether I multiply 5 with 8 or whether I multiply 8 with 5, the result would remain the same, which would be 40. Similarly, if I say multiply minus 3 with 7, or if I multiply 7 with minus 3, the result would be minus 21. So the order in which two integers are multiplied will not affect the product. So now you need to remember that subtraction, however, is not commutative. Next we have the associative property. So whenever we are multiplying three integers, grouping them differently will not change the product. For example, if I am multiplying 2 and 3 with 4, so whether I multiply 2 and 3 first and then multiply by 4, or whether I multiply 3 and 4 first and then multiply it by 2, both will yield the same result, which is 24. Similarly, if I say multiply minus 5 and 6 and then I multiply with 2, or whether I set aside minus 5 and I multiply 6 and 2, the result would be minus 60. So the grouping does not change the product. Next, whenever we multiply any integer with 0, the product would be 0. So 9 multiplied by 0 would be 0. Similarly, say minus 11 multiplied by 0 would again be 0. So this is multiplication by 0. Then we have multiplicative identity. So multiplying any integer by the number 1 leaves it unchanged. For example, say we are multiplying 4 with 1, the result would be 4. That is, 4 is remaining unchanged. This is known as multiplicative identity. Let's take another example. Say we are multiplying minus 7 with 1. The result would be minus 7. So the result remains unchanged whenever we are multiplying any integer by 1. We have the distributive property. So you need to keep in mind that multiplication is distributed over addition. This means, say I have three integers p, q and r, and if I am say adding q and r and then multiplying the result with p, so p multiplied by q plus r can also be written as p multiplied by q added to p multiplied by r. So for example, say we have 2 multiplied by 4 plus 3. So this we can write it as 2 multiplied by 4 added to 2 multiplied by 3. So in this case, the LHS would be 4 plus 3, 7, 2 multiplied by 7, which would be 14. RHS would be 2 multiplied by 4, which is 8, added to 2 multiplied by 3, which is 6. 8 plus 6, 14. So LHS equals the RHS. This is the distributive property. You need to remember that multiplication is always distributed over addition. Division of integers. So division is simply the opposite of multiplication. Division is the reverse of multiplication. For example, say we are multiplying 4 and 5. The result is 20. So I can write that 20 divided by 5 is 4. So division is simply the reverse of multiplication. Now there are a few key rules for division. Firstly, say we are dividing a positive integer with another positive integer. Now the result would always be positive, but it may not always be an integer. For example, say I divide 9 by 2. The result would be 4.5. So 9 and 2 are positive. 4.5 is also positive, but it is not an integer. Secondly, say if I am dividing negative by positive, the result would be negative. For example, say minus 15 divided by 3 would be minus 5. So negative by positive would be negative. Similarly, if I am say dividing positive by negative, the result would be negative. For example, 16 divided by minus 4 would be minus 4. Next, we have negative divided by negative. So in this case, the result would be positive. So dividing two negative integers will yield a positive quotient. For example, we are dividing minus 36 by minus 6. The result would be 6. You need to remember that a division is not commutative. Meaning, say I divide 10 by 2, the result is 5. But if I divide 2 by 10, the result is 0.2. Both are not the same. So clearly 10 by 2 and 2 by 10 are different. So division is not commutative. And finally, whenever we are dividing any integer by 1, the result remains the same. For example, 12 divided by 1 is 12 itself. Similarly, 0 divided by 1 is 0. Now, what happens, say, if we divide 1 by 0? So, the result in this case is not 0. So, whenever we divide any integer by 0, the result is not defined. So this you should always remember. So whenever we divide any integer by 0, the result is undefined or not defined. So in this we have seen various properties of multiplication, including closure property, commutative property and associative property. Secondly, we have seen some special cases such as multiplication by 0, multiplicative identity and distributive property. Then thirdly, we have seen a few rules of division.